Andrei Chikatilo, a name that sends shivers down the spine, was a Soviet serial killer who brutally ended the lives of at least 52 women and children. This man, born in Ukraine in 1936, lived a life marked by poverty and struggle, but it was the dark path he chose that has etched his name into the annals of crime history. Known as the Butcher of Rostov, or the Rostov Ripper, Chikatilo unleashed a reign of terror that spanned over a decade. From 1978 to 1990, he committed heinous acts of sexual assault, murder, and mutilation, leaving a trail of pain and loss that still haunts the memories of those who knew his victims. But who was Andrei Chikatilo? On the surface, he was an ordinary man, a laborer, a former soldier, and a student of engineering. He was a man who had known the hardships of life, who had seen the horrors of war, and who had been the victim of bullying. Yet beneath this veneer of normalcy, there lurked a monster. Chikatilo was plagued by chronic impotence, a condition that made forming relationships challenging. He was a man tormented by his own inadequacies, a man who felt shame and had even attempted suicide. But it was this inner turmoil, this struggle with himself, that perhaps led him down the path of violence and murder. His victims were largely women and children, the most vulnerable members of society. He exploited their trust, their innocence, turning their lives into a living nightmare before brutally ending them. His crimes were not just acts of violence, but also acts of dominance and control, a twisted manifestation of his own insecurities and frustrations. Andrei Chikatilo was a man who lived a double life, presenting one face to society and another to his victims. He was a man who could be your neighbor, your co-worker, or even your friend. But behind closed doors, he was the Butcher of Rostov, a monster who left a legacy of fear and pain, a man who lived a double life, presenting one face to society and another to his victims. Born into poverty and famine in Ukraine in 1936, Chikatilo's early life was fraught with difficulties. Imagine a world where every day is a struggle for survival, where food and warmth are luxuries, not givens. This was the reality of Andrei Chikatilo's childhood. His formative years were marred by the atrocities of World War II, a period that left an indelible imprint on his psyche. Chikatilo wasn't just navigating the horrors of a world at war, but also the torturous labyrinth of social interaction. A victim of bullying, he was an outcast, alienated from his peers. This isolation no doubt cast a long, dark shadow over his self-esteem, making him feel rejected and alone. However, Chikatilo wasn't just battling external forces. Inside, he grappled with a personal demon that would haunt him throughout his life: chronic impotence. This condition, misunderstood and stigmatized in his time, made it difficult for him to form relationships. His attempts at connection were thwarted by his body's betrayal. This only intensified his feelings of inadequacy and alienation. Despite these challenges, Chikatilo was determined to rise above his circumstances. He was a model student and an ardent communist, aspiring to create a better future for himself. But his drive to succeed was tainted by his internal struggles. He found solace in labor, immersing himself in work as a means to escape his torment. He even studied engineering and served in the Soviet army, trying to carve out a place for himself in a world that seemed to reject him at every turn. But even as he strove for normalcy, Chikatilo was plagued by his personal demons. His return to his village after military service was marked by unsuccessful relationships. Each failure fueled his feelings of shame and inadequacy, pushing him to the brink of despair. He even attempted suicide, a desperate cry for relief from his internal torment. These early experiences shaped the monster Chikatilo would become. His life was a simmering pot of pain, rejection, and frustration. It was only a matter of time before it boiled over, unleashing a reign of terror that would shock the world. Despite being a model student and an ardent communist, Chikatilo was plagued by inner demons. Andrei Chikatilo, a name that would later send chills down the spine of many, was once a man who seemed to have a promising future. His academic prowess was impressive. He was a model student. His commitment to his beliefs was unwavering. He was an ardent communist. But beneath the surface of this seemingly normal life, there was a storm brewing, a tempest of dark desires and twisted thoughts. After completing his studies, Chikatilo served in the Soviet army, a duty he fulfilled with the same dedication he showed in his academic life. But the military service was just another mask, another facade behind which the real Chikatilo was hiding. When he returned to his village after completing his military service, he tried to fit into the ordinary life. He sought companionship, he sought love, but his relationships were unsuccessful. Each failed attempt at normalcy only served to fuel his inner turmoil, driving him deeper into the abyss of his own darkness. In his despair, Chikatilo attempted suicide. It was a desperate cry for help from a man being consumed by his own inner demons. But it was also a turning point, a grim marker on his path to becoming one of history's most notorious serial killers. This unsuccessful suicide attempt wasn't the end of Chikatilo's story, but rather the beginning of his dark path. It was the genesis of a horrifying journey that would lead to the deaths of at least 52 innocent lives. And so, Andrei Chikatilo, the model student, the dedicated soldier, the failed lover, began to tread a path that was as dark as the thoughts that haunted him. His life, which on the surface appeared ordinary, was a mask that concealed the growing darkness within. A seemingly normal life, concealing a growing darkness within. From 1978 to 1990, Chikatilo unleashed a reign of terror that would make him one of the most notorious serial killers in history. This period, spanning over a decade, would see the brutal murders of at least 52 innocent women and children, and it would be forever marked by the horrifying deeds of one man. Chikatilo's victims were vulnerable, often young or marginalized individuals whom he lured with promises of help or company. Once he had them in his grasp, he would subject them to unthinkable acts of violence. His methods were chillingly consistent, a signature blend of sexual assault, murder, and mutilation that would come to define his monstrous legacy. The fear that Chikatilo instilled in society during this time was palpable. Parents warned their children against speaking to strangers, communities lived in a state of constant unease, and every unexplained disappearance was attributed to the invisible specter of the Butcher of Rostov. The gruesome details of his crimes, relayed through hushed whispers and fearful glances, painted a grim picture of a predator lurking in the shadows, ready to strike at any moment. Despite the terror he inspired, Chikatilo remained a faceless phantom for many years. His ability to blend into the crowd, to appear as nothing more than an ordinary man, made him all the more terrifying. He was not a monster lurking in the dark, but a wolf in sheep's clothing, hiding in plain sight. This insidious blend of normalcy and monstrosity was what made Chikatilo's reign of terror so profoundly disturbing. As the years passed and the body count rose, the specter of Chikatilo hung like a dark cloud over society. His crimes were not just acts of individual brutality, but a symptom of a deeper societal malaise, a reflection of the darkness that can lurk within even the most ordinary of men. A reign of terror that would leave a permanent scar on the face of society. Chikatilo's horrifying legacy serves as a stark reminder of the depths of human depravity, a chilling testament to the monsters that can hide behind the mask of normalcy. His reign of terror may have ended, but the echoes of his crimes still resonate, a ghostly reminder of the Butcher of Rostov. In 1992, Chikatilo's reign of terror came to an end when he was finally brought to justice. The Soviet Union was shaken to its core as Andrei Romanovich Chikatilo, the notorious Butcher of Rostov, was arrested and brought to trial. A man who had once been a model student and ardent communist found himself in the spotlight for all the wrong reasons. His arrest was the culmination of a painstaking investigation that had spanned over a decade. The evidence was overwhelming, and Chikatilo found himself cornered. In a shocking turn of events, he confessed to the atrocities he had committed. He admitted to the sexual assault, murder, and mutilation of 56 innocent souls. The courtroom was filled with a chilling silence as he described his heinous acts with a chilling nonchalance. The trial was one of the most sensational in the history of the Soviet Union. Every detail of his gruesome crimes was laid bare, sending shockwaves throughout the nation and the world. The newspapers were filled with headlines about the Butcher of Rostov, and the public was both horrified and fascinated by the twisted mind of Chikatilo. The jury deliberated, and the verdict was unanimous. Chikatilo was convicted for 52 of the 56 murders he had confessed to. The court found that there was insufficient evidence for the remaining 4. The sentence was as severe as the crimes he had committed: death. His reign of terror had finally come to an end. In February 1994, Chikatilo was executed by gunshot, marking the end of a dark chapter in the annals of criminal history. The butcher of Rostov was no more, but the scars he left behind would never fade. The butcher of Rostov had fallen, but the horror of his deeds would never be forgotten. His name became a chilling reminder of the darkness that can lurk within the human soul, a testament to the depths of depravity one can sink to. While justice had been served, the memory of his victims and the terror he inflicted would forever remain imprinted in the annals of true crime.